to start on a personal note. We heard that you actually had COVID-19 yourself a couple months ago and you've recovered. Tell us about what that experience was like.
Yeah, it was in March, actually, very early on during the pandemic, and it was scary. I mean, it was not a fun experience. Now I'm 47 years old, so I had a relatively mild course of it. The first week was especially more like a flu, but then the second week I went into that second phase that a lot of people talk about, where I started desaturating and feeling much worse. But then thankfully at around day 12, I was able to get out of it.
That's great. And we're glad you're feeling better and you're recovered now. And now you're actually applying your company's technology. You're testing one of your drugs for some of the more severe effects that we see in some patients with COVID-19. Tell us about this approach.
So essentially, while we wait for vaccines to hopefully come around and help us, we need drugs that can help patients and reduce mortality in the late stages. So in other words, patients that end up in the hospital, that are at risk of dying. We have a lot of drugs that are in development, not us. Our industry has a lot of drugs in development or on the market that could help with that so-called cytokinetic storm. And our approach falls within that category. So it is essentially something that is designed to interfere in the very latest stages and try to improve survival.
So you're testing it in patients who have this severe respiratory failure. And what's really interesting about the approach is that it not only could help with that issue, but also the abnormal formation of blood clots, which does appear to be sort of an emerging problem that people are recognizing that happens with these severe COVID-19 patients. And you've actually done some studies on that overactive immune response, seeing that your drug could potentially help with that, right?
Yeah, that is correct. So this is the fascinating kind of observation that we have, especially with people that end up, dying from COVID-19, is that problem of what we call thrombotic microangiopathy, which are blood clots that form in the small blood vessels. And the complement system, which is this part of the immune system that we target with our compounds, seems to be very important in driving that clotting phenomenon. And so we have done already a study in patients with COVID-19 to evaluate what happens to this complement system while patients have the infection. And that led us to believe that intervening there may be of benefit.
I know you're in the very early stages here, just starting your trial in COVID-19 patients. But I want to ask you a question we're asking all CEOs, really, who are working in this space. You're a relatively young company, no products yet on the market. What is your philosophy about, if your drug does work, about profiting from that work you're doing in this pandemic?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I think that the first thing to see, and I've really witnessed this firsthand, is that the vast majority of companies in biotechnology kind of locked arms and came together to try to do something here. I've literally not heard the word profit fall once. So I think it's a unique opportunity for us as an industry to step forward and essentially, help society get better here. We feel and we want to be a part of that. Profit is not something that we've even thought about in this context. What we want to do right now is hopefully, help patients and reduce the mortality from this condition.
Dr. Francois, it's Scott back in the studio. I have a quick question for you. What form is this drug actually in? Is it an intravenous? Is it a pill? How would this be taken?
So it's an intravenous therapy that is given to patients in the hospital, typically in an ICU setting. Again, kind of in the very late stages, patients who are at risk of dying and trying to bring them out of that cytokinetic storm that they are in.